Welcome to Power to Speak, the podcast. And today my guest is Gerry Clarke. And Gerry Clarke is a retired chairman of international corporate communication companies, including AgriVisual, Video at Work, Video Newsreel, and Virtual Media. So welcome, Gerry. Thank you so much for coming today.
Well, thank you, Jackie, for inviting me to your Power to Speak podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. So tell us a little bit about these video companies that you started. I'm particularly intrigued as to what is AgriVisual.
Right. Well, I started out in life as an agricultural botanist. I have a degree in agricultural botany, and I went overseas to help develop agricultural projects in Africa and the Caribbean. And I soon recognized there was a need to teach farmers how to grow more food. So when I came back from the Far East, I set up a company called AgriVisual, and we set out to make films to teach farmers how to grow food and improve their lifestyle. And because of the development of technology, we moved from film production through to video, and now to social media. So the brands that I created as businesses, because basically I guess I'm an entrepreneur as well, to reflect the technology that we use. Now I use virtual media technology to create programs and communicate with people in many different fields. So that's how I've evolved those names of the companies that I run.
Wow. So tell us a little bit how that came about then. I mean, it's that kind of juxtaposition of botanist and video production. How did that come about? So tell us a little bit about the botany side of things. Because I know you grew up not far from where I did in North London.
Indeed.
So where did the interest in botany come from?
Well, I guess it evolved. I grew up, as you mentioned, in London after the war, and in order to escape the urban jungle and the bomb sites, I joined the Scouts. The Scouts gave me a great insight into leadership, into making friendship, and developed interest in outdoor pursuits. And consequently, when I was looking at a university to go to following school, I opted to go and study agriculture and botany in North Wales. And North Wales, as we all know, is a great place to visit. You've got the mountains, you've got the sea. They speak Welsh, which makes it almost like a foreign country. So I went to Bangor, and when I graduated, I was then offered a job with the Commonwealth Development Corporation. And I was sent to Africa to help develop agricultural projects in Southern Africa. And again, I recognized there was a need to teach people how to do things better. So AgriVisual came out of that. And then over a period of time, I moved from filmmaking into video production and applied the knowledge and skills that I had in telling stories and informing, motivating, inspiring people through film to use video and web TV and those sorts of technologies.
Yeah. So were you sort of pioneering in that way? Did you?
Well, I think so.
There at the
Yeah,
beginning
I mean,
of all this?
yes, I'd like to think of myself as a pioneer. I would try out new technology to see if it improves what I do. And so many years ago, I made an hour-long film all about the social computer. It was one of the Faraday films back in the 70s. And I discovered all sorts of fun things that you could do with computers. You just had to apply that technique to solve problems or whatever one was doing in life, whether you were managing a company or promoting a product or generally entertaining people. The computers have a great role to play, and I saw the potential, and I've always harnessed the power of technology to do that.
So the precursor of the social media that we see today, is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I guess so. I was producing web TV programs back at the beginning of this century. I had spent several years making programs for BT. I launched something called Network BT, which was like a video news magazine all about the latest technology. And BT said to me, would I like to produce a program to explain the internet, how it works, and what the importance of the internet will be to staff and to customers. So during the course of my research, I discovered that if I could learn to type, I could create my own emails. And if I could create my own emails, I didn't need a secretary. And if I didn't need a secretary, I didn't need an office. So I sold up and I moved to the south of France because I used the technology to create a new way of doing things. And I launched virtual media. And I still employed, or I still had working relationships with people that worked for me, but they became freelance, independent. They worked from their place of living. I lived in France, and we carried on making films in a virtual world. And it was very successful.
And what year was that?
Initially, it was 1998. I just
Right.
made a program about deregulation of telephone networks in Europe. And then I found a place down in the south of France, just outside Nice. And in those days, you could fly to Nice quite quickly and quite cheaply. And it was a good place. It was no further away from London than, say, Edinburgh. So I was able to live in the south of France and commute to London to produce and direct films on location in the UK.
Yeah. And so what were those films then that you were directing and producing?
Well, my background is in agriculture, and perhaps we'll come back to that later on. But I ended up making a lot of programs for the government and for the airlines on security. Aviation security became a big problem after the hijacks in the Middle East and the IRA issues in London, bomb threats. And I became an expert in producing programs to create better awareness of how to protect our buildings, our companies, and people. We dealt with bomb threats, the potential of bomb threats at Heathrow, for example. I went out to the Middle East to film on location attempted hijack of an aircraft, and we blew it up electronically with digital CGI techniques, and it was very effective, very impacting. But we majored in aviation security, and hence I ended up making programs for the government dealing with bomb threats and technology that we now use and find common at airports.
Yeah.
I remember on one occasion we were filming airside at Heathrow in Terminal 4, and it was a story about a terrorist cell that were placing a bomb in a 747. And we had a couple of actors, film crew, and a few props. And as we approached the airport apron, we were asked to put all our equipment through an X-ray machine. And what I didn't realize is the fake bomb was so realistic. They spotted it in the X-ray machine and said, "What's that? That looks like a bomb." And the guy who was with me, who happened to be a British Airways employee, and he was Irish, said, "Oh no, it's not a bomb, it's nothing to do with us." And of course they panicked. They hit the panic button, and within minutes we were surrounded by armed police and military, and we rushed off to the airport police station to account for our activities. We had permission to do this, but that authority hadn't been passed down to the people on the X-ray machines at the security gate.
Oh no, they didn't get the memo.
No, it was a very sensitive area. You remember,
absolutely.
Bomb attacks at Terminal 4 just before that, and we got called in to make a program to create better awareness amongst staff of the need to be vigilant.
I mean, as I was living in London,
big growth area.
I was living in London at that time, and there was bomb threats going off. I was in Knightsbridge when the bomb went off at Harrods, and so it was there was a lots of
Indeed, and we ended up making another program for Eurotunnel. At the time when Eurotunnel was being developed and built, there was concern that the IRA had made threats to blow up the tunnel under the channel, be a huge publicity coup. So again, I was called in by Alistair Morton, chief executive of Eurotunnel, and said, "Look, we've got a problem. How can you help?" So we put together a dramatized story about an IRA cell. We filmed on location in the railway sidings at Didcot. We did it at night, so it looked so it could be anywhere. But we created an impression so realistic that when he saw the program, he said, "You can't show this to our staff they won't want to come work here. But anyway, we managed to water it down a bit, but it was, again, an illustration of how effective films can be to tell a story, to dramatize something, to change people's attitudes. And that's really, I guess, what I've been doing for the last few years. Started out in agriculture, but it ended up in all sorts of new technologies that we are very familiar with these days.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I always ask my guests sort of 3 simple questions sort of to get me, give me an idea of what to talk about. And you've sent me over 2 pages of stuff.
Well,
Amazing.
nothing like a shotgun approach. Yeah.
You have had such an amazing career. I mean, let's step back a little bit. I really would like to find out more, because where you started and where you've ended up is just, I mean, there's such a breadth of information in there. And I'm just being nosy, really. But that boy back in London, in sort of the bomb,
in the Scouts,
in the Scouts, and you know, coming out of the war. I mean, I just say I grew up in London in the 60s and the 70s, and yeah, we used to play on the bomb sites. They used to call the bombies. They used to call them places where bombs had dropped, and then they hadn't rebuilt anything; they'd just sort of left it. So, so what was that like back then, and what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, it was a bit like the Bash Street Kids out of the Beat, I think. Yeah, I wanted to travel. I think I wanted to escape the urban environment that had been badly damaged after the war. And as I said, I went initially to university in North Wales, but whilst I was there, I was offered a summer vacation job working for the Canadian government. And that meant flying over to New York and taking the Greyhound bus across America. And I ended up in southern Alberta on an agricultural research station. And after that, I went down to California, and it opened up my horizons to the big wide world there to be discovered and conquered. So when I came back to the UK, I finished my degree and I joined the Commonwealth Development Corporation. It took me overseas again to see the world, which I've always enjoyed doing. I travel a lot. I enjoy traveling. Well, I'm getting a bit old these days, and I can't hack queuing like cattle to board a plane. That's a nightmare. And I imagine these days that going through airports with the COVID security arrangements, it's even worse. So that's how I got started on that.
Yeah. There wasn't a part of you that said, right, I want to be an explorer. I mean, I seem to remember you saying that David Attenborough was a bit of an inspiration for you.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I did. I guess I watched television growing up in London, and I saw people like David Attenborough doing Zoo Quest and discovering animals in African jungles. I think, hey, this looks fun, and that was perhaps a dream. But I did manage to get to visit many places to make films. But I always dealt with people rather than animals, people and plants, I guess. So, a lot of the stories I've created, and I've written and produced several hundred films and videos in my time, they're all designed to motivate, inspire, educate, promote, train, teach people new skills. It's a communications life, I guess, a life of communications. There you go.
Yeah, amazing. So you do write the scripts as well, do you?
Well, I used to. Yeah, I enjoy writing. I wouldn't say it's what I want to do all my life. In fact, I have changed the way I do things. I spend more time writing and directing than actually going out and doing things. Yeah, sorry, I got lost there.
And no. I mean, is it the discipline between documentary making and dramatizations? Is it very different?
I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, you need to create an image in somebody's mind, whether they're watching a film or looking at a photograph or reading a magazine. I have a very visual memory, and images mean a lot to me in the way you compose the picture, the content. And filmmaking just takes that concept of an image and embellishes it, adds sound, adds commentary, adds music. Music's a great way of creating an atmosphere. You remember the John Williams Star Wars theme? Well, that music helped me launch a whole series of training films for Massey Ferguson in Africa, because I used the soundtrack of John Williams' Star Wars, bringing tractors from outer space and landing on a field in Africa and going to work to help farmers grow more food for their families. It was the music that inspired people. So it's a combination of visual, music, and good script writing. But a story can it can make its own story if you've got the right images in the right sequence.
Yeah.
So that's something I would certainly recommend.
Yeah. And so the video making then, did that, because I know you went to Africa and were teaching farmers how to farm, and you've used that wonderful quote about teaching a man to fish.
Yeah, well, that's a parable I learned early in life. You can give a man a fish and he can feed his family for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he can keep his family alive for many years. So that is really encapsulating the concept. You teach people to do things better. You cascade information down through a community. And when I was out in the Caribbean, I actually went back to university in Trinidad. I did a master's in communications. And I looked at the way in which farmers received knowledge and information about new products. This was in the days before television, before social media. And most of them would read stuff, but not many people could read and write. And then we used radio. So it's a question of finding a way to get that information into the community. And one thing I was quite proud of, I lived and worked in Swaziland for 4 years. That's in Southern Africa. And the company I worked with, which was a subsidiary of Commonwealth Development Corporation, decided to present the King of Swaziland with a mobile public address system so he could communicate with his people, which I thought was a great idea. So they asked me to help design and build this unit. So I found an old Ford Transit and put some speakers on the roof and a PA system, and it worked beautifully. And I was invited to go to the Royal Palace in Swaziland to present the unit to the king. I was working with his scriptwriters and soothsayers, and I was invited to the palace, which in fact was a whole bunch of grass huts, the royal corral in Mbabane. And the custom in those days was the king always had to be above everybody else, and he was sitting on a huge throne, beautifully carved ivory with gold inlay and lion skins and a headdress behind the throne. And we had to sit below him, below his feet, sitting on little elephant stools, which was a bit painful, but that's how it worked. So afterwards, I demonstrated to the king how it all worked. And of course, they were delighted. Not only could he talk to his people, he could be a DJ. He could play music. There was a deck there and he could play music. So they used it as a party wagon after that. But sadly, I heard later on that they'd had a terrible fire and a lot of things were damaged. So I guess the moral of the story is people in grass houses shouldn't stow thrones.
Very good. Very good. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And so tell us how you ended up being a banana plantation manager. And was that beforehand? Was that before? Are we going back?
Joining the Commonwealth Development Corporation, CDC, as I used to call it, the Colonial Donkey Company, we were sent out as young English managers to go and help develop parts of the world where the Commonwealth was active. And they had plantations in the Caribbean, in St. Lucia, Dominica, and I was offered a post to run a plantation there for a year. And I had 1,000 acres of tropical rainforest. I had a staff about 150, a fleet of trucks, vehicles, tractors, and so on. And I was responsible for the welfare and health and the employment of all these people. It was interesting. Some of the workers on this estate were descended from the Carib Indians. I didn't realize before I went there that the Carib Indians were the people, they were the indigenous tribes of the West Indies. When Christopher Columbus arrived, all the the Caribs welcomed him. I'm not sure why, but at the time he was welcomed. And the Caribs had their own reservations, and we had, they were a pretty wild bunch. I mean, 20 years before I went there, they were cannibals. They had been eating each other. In fact, our nearest neighbours were missionaries. We had a Roman Catholic missionary, and we had a Baptist ministry, and they were trying to convert these wild Carib people into civilized human beings. But we did have issues. I mean, I remember one occasion we sent the wages truck into the main town to pick up the wages for the staff, and it failed to get back. I wonder what the hell happened. So we sent a search party, and they discovered the Caribs. They created a gang, and they hijacked the wages truck. They cut down a huge forest tree across the road. When the truck screeched to halt, these little guys came out with bows and arrows and blowpipes and proceeded to grab the money and rush off into the forest. It was a long while before the police arrived. In those days, the flying squad were on bicycles. That didn't help. But they did find them, and the gang were all in a local beer hall, absolutely stoned. So we got some of the money back, and we had to fire a few people for misbehaviour.
So are they still there in the West Caribbean?
Oh yes, very much so. Yeah, very integrated into the community. Dominica is an unusual island. It's called the Switzerland of the Caribbean. It's very mountainous. It has a rainfall of over 200 inches a year, which is significant. And of course, it's in the hurricane belt. And when I was there, we did have some strong wind. We didn't actually have a hurricane, but it was quite a wild place to live. And these people lived in the bush, a lot of them in grass huts again. But they were friendly people, but they had fairly primitive ideas.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those places in the world that it unfortunately does suffer from the weather, doesn't it? It can be quite extreme.
Yes, that particular island, it is a rainforest, and by nature, it requires a lot of rainfall to make the forest trees grow.
Yeah.
It's somewhat similar to another project I was involved with in the Philippines. After I left CDC, I was offered a job with the World Bank to become an agronomist on a mission to look into the development of an island in the Philippines called Mindoro. I was out there for about 8 weeks doing a survey, interviewing farmers about their lifestyle and so on. And these guys were very primitive. I mean, they used to use pieces of carved bamboo to send messages. No internet in those days. If they want to send a message, they cut it on a piece of bamboo, and they got a runner to go through the forest to deliver it to the next village. That's how it was.
Yeah. Whenabouts was this? What sort of time
this was in 1975, 76. My daughter was born whilst I was out in the Philippines. So I didn't see her for 3 or 4 months. But anyway, this reminds me of the date. Yeah.
Yeah. So were you making films at that point? Was that?
No, I just left CDC because I was offered a better job with the World Bank. And whilst I was out there, I discovered that the advertising agency, J. Walter Thompson, were heavily involved in publicizing, marketing and promoting technology direct to farmers. They were using radio broadcasts and all the razzmatazz of PR, T-shirts, funny golf hats, umbrellas, all that sort of thing. And I thought, gosh, and it was actually working. It helped promote the Green Revolution, which was the theme in those days to help feed the nation. So when I came back to the UK, following finalising my report, I decided to start my own company, which is AgriVisual, in order to use new communications technology to help promote things to farmers. And so the first film I made was about an irrigation system, but I very quickly got involved with some of the agrochemical companies like Shell and ICI. One of the films I made for ICI won an award, which was a great feather in our cap, because we weren't thinking about awards, but it was very effective in promoting crop production in Nigeria. But going back to Shell asked me if I could advise them on communications to ensure the safe and effective use of their pesticides. So I had an office in Nairobi, and I was working in Lagos as well. So I traveled quite a bit around Africa. And the role there was to help promote the safe use of their chemicals, which I found a fascinating story. And I spent a lot of time out in the bush, in rural areas. And that grew into quite a big contract with Shell, and then with other companies wanting to do similar things.
Yeah. Was it when was it that you actually climbed Kilimanjaro?
Well, that was a few years later. We managed to secure a contract with the European Union to help coffee farmers increase the production and the quality of their coffee in Tanzania. So I had an office and staff out in Kilimanjaro area over a period of 2 years. So I decided one of my ambitions was to climb Kilimanjaro. So I said to the guys, anybody want to come with me? And there were 28 of us set off to climb to the top of Kilimanjaro. Most of those were porters carrying all our gear, because we obviously made a film. We actually made a TV commercial there as well. I was dressed as a gorilla drinking coffee. It was a fun thing to do. But also, I enjoy what I do, and because we had the cameras, we did a little sequence and claimed a Guinness World Record for driving the golf ball from the highest point of the world, which I thought confident they would accept. But when I applied or sent the footage and details, they said, no, it doesn't qualify because you couldn't prove where the ball landed. It was somewhere in the bush, several thousand feet below the high point.
Oh, nice try though. Nice try. And how long does it take to climb Kilimanjaro?
7 days there and back.
Wow.
Not because it's a great distance, it's, I guess, 35 miles, but because you need to adjust, the body needs to adjust to the altitude. And a lot of people try and get up there and back in 2 or 3 days, and they don't succeed. But we spent 6 days climbing, spent nights in huts on the way up. We eventually got to the very summit. Not everybody gets to the very peak of Kilimanjaro. They get to a lower place called Gilman's Point. But the peak is called Uhuru, which means freedom in Swahili. And I managed to put a Union Jack up there and took some photographs. Yeah, we had a good time.
So does that mean England, Britain now own Kilimanjaro?
Political question. No, I don't suppose it survived very long. But I remember when we got back down, we came back down in a day. That's how quick you can descend. We then took a flight from Kilimanjaro airport back to Schiphol, I think, in Holland. And I spoke to the crew as I boarded this KLM jet and told them what we've been doing. And they said, "Oh, great, we'll fly around the summit so you can take a photograph." So we got this wonderful photograph of the summit of Kilimanjaro, covered in snow. But I couldn't see the Union Jack. Pretty blown away already.
Oh, amazing. So then how did you, sorry, I mean, there is so much, there's so much to talk to you about that I want to cover everything. Because I have an interest with what I do, and power to speak, and people's communication is what I do, helping people communicate. And I am hoping to work with somebody on training films for corporates. And that's something that you, again, almost pioneered, that you kind of stepped into that arena of...
You've obviously done your research. Yeah, I mean, if people remember the days of Video Arts, which was John Cleese's production company, producing training programs using actors. Well, we tried to do the same thing with dear old John Challis, who was Boise in Only Fools and Horses.
Yeah.
I cast him as a slightly unscrupulous insurance salesman, and it was all about the story of data protection. And we made the film. It cost me, I don't know, in those days, £10,000 to make, but we spent another £10,000 promoting it, publicizing it, buying adverts in Management Today and magazines like that. So the total cost of production is about £20,000. But because we were selling it at sort of £5 a copy or what it was in those days, we never got to cover the cost. So I decided this wasn't for me. No. I always concentrated on making films for an audience, a bit of a narrow cast approach. And I knew that we were going to get paid, so I could pay the staff. I mean, in those days, I was employing 28 people making films. We had 5 cutting rooms, and we were churning out 20 or 30 documentary films and then videos a year. And at the end of the month, we had to pay people their wages. So we had to make sure the income was coming in to cover the costs of production and delivery. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just looking back, I mean, you've now kind of retired to the South Coast, and you're sort of before we move on to what it is that you're doing now, which again is amazing. What was the favorite part of your career up to that point?
Well, I guess meeting people. I really enjoy meeting people, like meeting you and perhaps meeting your audience, discovering how other people enjoy their lives. You know, what makes people tick. Because I'm a creative, I tend to favor people with artistic skills, whether it's music or sculpture or painting or some other creative activity that I find interesting. It's something I've picked up later in life. I enjoy travel, but with COVID these days, that's not so easy. But thanks to the internet, thanks to the virtual reality worlds that we can create, we can actually keep in touch with people.
Yeah.
I was on the Zoom call a couple of weeks ago with a chap called Victor Purton, who's an optimist. He runs the Centre for Optimism in Melbourne. So we were able to have a long chat about optimism, happiness and well-being. But I didn't need to travel to see him. We could just do that online.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're obviously a very creative person yourself. I mean, that's quite obvious in what you do.
Yeah, I have a sort of a Damien Hirst approach. I pull a team together. You know, when you're making a film, you've got to think about filming it. You've got to film about recording the sound, recording the music, creating graphics, titles, and so on. And then you've got to publicize it, and then you've got to deliver it. There are many skills. Well, I have knowledge, a little bit of knowledge about everything, but I'm not an expert in any particular area, which suits me because I can bring a team together. They've got the skills. That's why I created virtual media. Virtual media is a good example of how you can create a virtual team. Thanks to the internet, thanks to the ability to communicate instantly to people, you can get a cameraman to go and record a piece in London this morning. You can then get somebody else to write a script and get somebody else to do. So it's the use of the internet to bring people together, and that's what I enjoy doing.
I absolutely believe that is creative. That to me, I mean, I don't know if you have a definition of creativity, but for me, it's about problem solving. And I mean, I asked my dad, bless him, who's obviously a stuntman, what was his definition of creativity, and he just said it's doing. And I think, and when he first said it, I was like, well, no, get real, Dad. It's not about just doing, but it is that kind of just taking action.
Well, yeah, it is doing, but it's
creating,
also
it's sort of creating and problem solving and risk taking and all of those things.
Yeah, well, it's all of those things, but it's also, for me, it's expressing yourself. Yeah, we all have views and opinions, and if you can do that in a creative way, you can entertain, you can inform, and you can inspire people. I like to think that a lot of the work I've produced, I mean, of the 350 odd films that I've been involved in making, we've reached an audience of 500 million people. A huge number of people around the world have seen the films, but they're not in the entertainment arena. They're not broadcast programs. They're programs to help people do things better.
Yeah, yeah, and it's amazing. So let's move on now. Talking about creativity, and we met basically because of the Global Happiness Cafe, which is something you started.
Yeah.
And I came in and did a talk on creativity.
It's excellent. I found it very inspirational.
Yeah, because for me, creativity is who I am, and it's what makes me happy. It's what I do for my own well-being, for my own happiness. And I think it's something that playing and playfulness that comes with creativity, everybody should continue doing, through adulthood. And I think, it kind of gets squashed somehow through secondary school and people starting careers that they think they should do and living a life they think they should and living to expectations. And so that kind of happiness and creativity kind of it gets lost in all of that. And what you're doing now is really trying to bring that back and bring that to the fore. So tell us a little bit about the World Happiness Project.
Well, I came up with a vision to increase happiness and mental health, improve mental health and well-being, as a worthwhile exercise. And I met Chris Croft, who is a local entrepreneur and management trainer, and we got together and we launched the World Happiness Project. And our vision was to create a television series or a video stream to show people how they can adopt new ideas to promote happiness, to increase their happiness. And we're still hoping to get a commission to produce a series which people will find entertaining, interesting, and informative. I think there's a program to be made. I've never seen anything on television about happiness per se. It's always about other people's problems, but I think a program which shows how to adopt a happier lifestyle would be very worthwhile. In order to achieve that, we've launched a couple of ideas. Last year we got very close to launching the first National Happiness and Wellbeing Conference here in Bournemouth, which was to showcase the actions and interventions that can improve people's happiness, whether it's in the home, in the community, or the workplace. And we partnered with Bournemouth University and BCP, that's the Bournemouth Christchurch Pool Council, and we had everything set up to run a weekend conference at Fernbarrows, the Bournemouth University campus last year. But sadly, it was the first day of lockdown. So we had to postpone that. I'm hoping maybe next year we can revisit that, but we have moved on a bit. I think live events, conference events may be a little more tricky, although I'm interested to see a lot of live music events now and theatres beginning to get back together in London theatres, so it may be possible. But in the meantime, we came up with the idea of creating an online global happy cafe. Now, a happy cafe is just a way of getting together with people, like-minded people, to talk about things. And we decided to run a monthly meeting online. We started out talking to people about happiness, what happiness meant to them. We now have over 1,000 subscribers worldwide, and we've got people in Europe, in South America, in Africa, and in Australia who meet regularly to talk about what makes them happy. And we're creating better awareness of things you can do. And we're working very closely with the Action for Happiness organization. They're one of the leaders of the global happiness movement. And they came up with some of the 10 keys to happier living. And they've got this, mnemonic called Great Dream. Now, Great Dream stands for G for giving, R for relating, E for exercise, A for awareness, and T for trying something out. And dream, D is for direction in life, R is for resilience, being strong, E is for emotion, looking for what's good in people, A is for accepting who you are. We're not all perfect. And M is for meaning. What's the meaning of life? And I find that whole concept very interesting. And my mission, if you like, is to help encourage people to think about life. Why are we here on this earth? What are we doing? And how can we do things better that we enjoy doing? And for me, happiness is about family. It's about friendships. It's about meeting people, but it's also about nature. It's about exploring the wonderful world that we live in. And of course, it's relationships in work, business, family. I think we can all learn to be happier if we wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. No, more power to you. I think it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, obviously there are annual happiness scores around the world, and we all, once a year get to hear, which country is happier than the next country, and all of those sort of things. Do you think we should? Obviously, you think we should be doing more, but are there examples in other countries that we could learn from?
Oh, very much so. Yes. I mean, being happy is not about money. As long as you've got enough to feed yourself and your family, That's probably the most important thing. But happiness is about time. Do you have time to do things which bring pleasure? I talked about work-life balance, and in my life, I've migrated from a 9 to 5 office job to doing things online. I spend more time doing things that I enjoy. So time is important. Money is not a big driver in this. So we can go and find different ways of living which increase our happiness. The Scandinavians always do well with the World Happiness Report because they have a society which tends to be a bit more social, a bit more cooperative. I think that's what I'm trying to think. Yeah, they work together to do things, and that's good to be involved with others in improving the community. I mean, here in the village where I live, a little village in Dorset, I've come up with the idea, let's work together to put in an art trail, a sculpture trail through the village, and let's open it in time to commemorate the Platinum Jubilee of the Queen in June next year. It's to get the community together, to work together and have fun doing it.
Yeah.
So that's an example of how you can change happiness. But some of our subscribers are, for example, from India, and Indian philosophy is quite different to Western philosophy, and they find happiness in family and in music. In Japan, again, they have a different religion, and their happiness means different things to people in Japan. In North America, and we have a lot of Americans tuning in now, because it's all a bit bright and razzmatazz. The American style is a big noise, make a lot of noise about activities. And in a way, it goes back to the American Declaration of Independence, which the main precepts were about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is in the American Constitution. So in this country, we don't recognize happiness as important. And I found in life that to be happy is good. You can enjoy your life, you can spread happiness, and have a positive take on the world. See the glass half full rather than half empty. And I must admit, I call into question the way news is reported. It's all about doom and gloom. We never feature people's happiness and how they've achieved something. Maybe things are slightly different. We look at sports people who've done good things, but we must focus more on what makes people happy.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I came along to the media briefing forum that you held last week before. Tell us a little bit about that, because you really are trying to get across to the media that there's something here that could be promoted.
Yeah, well, we've often felt that people don't recognize the importance of learning how to be happy in life. The media is full of stories about other people's misfortunes, about the 3 C's: COVID, conflict, and climate change. They're important things, but despite that, you can still be happy if you have a positive outlook on life. So the idea I came up with is, why don't we try and show the influential journalists and broadcast media people who are responsible for determining the news and how it's reported. Let's explain to them, show them what happiness really is, get them involved in Great Dream to understand the basic principles. So we launched an online meeting last week. We invited over 200 leading journalists, news editors, and broadcast media people, and explained to them. We had some of the world's leading experts or authorities in happiness. Sir Anthony Selden joined us. Lord Layard has written several books on the subject. Gus O'Donnell, who is the private secretary to Blair and Cameron, he set up the What Works for Wellbeing organisation in London. So they're dealing with happiness and wellbeing in offices, in business. And we had Tom Morris, who is a well-known American philosopher who joined us from the States, and he talked about the American take on happiness and well-being. So it was a series of short presentations to explain the importance of happiness, why it matters, and how we can all be happier in life.
Yeah, and how successful do you think that will be at persuading
Well,
media?
I don't know. Perhaps we might see a few more programs, a few more news items about people's happiness, how they've discovered things in life which has increased their ability to enjoy life. Like I said, why wouldn't you want to be happier? If somebody can show me how to be happy, I'll follow that advice.
Absolutely. But you are, I mean, is the dream or the ambition with this to actually create a TV show or create something?
Well, yeah, I
in
mean, we set out to produce a series of programs on how to be happier. And I think we've come up with various ways of telling that story. But so far, people said, yeah, it's an interesting idea. We don't think it's going to sell papers. It's not going to sell the audience ratings. That's their view. I think we will find that people will say, this is interesting. I want to learn more. Because if you can discover how people in, say, Bhutan are happy with their families, and they're very poor levels of income, but they're extremely happy people, we can learn something from that. So it's a message that we want to get out, like a message in a bottle. Sooner or later, it's going to pick it up and say, hey, this is interesting. Find me the source of supply.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us then where people can contact you. Obviously, you've put on the screen there. Is that where people can find
We
you?
have a website called worldhappinessproject.org.
Or let me see if
I
I've
have an
got that.
email address. The easiest thing to get hold of me is Gerry at worldhappinesstvproject.org. I guess you can print that out on the screen at some stage. I won't give you my phone number at the moment, but I'm very happy to talk to people and listen to other people's ideas that we might develop.
Yeah, I've got your website there. Can people contact you through your website? Is there a
Yes, either through the World Happiness website or my own personal website, Gerry.Clarke at gerryclarke.co.uk, I think it is.
Yeah, it's showing there on the screen, but I will make sure that there are links to all
Well,
of
thank
these,
you.
all of these on
Good.
sort of show notes and things,
Yeah.
so that when people come to listen to this or to watch it, they will know exactly where to
Well, I'd be
contact
very
you.
delighted to hear from anybody who has some ideas and suggestions, and maybe spread the word about how we can all be happier in life. It's about
Yeah,
happiness, improved mental health, and well-being. It's a topic which is becoming increasingly noted and increasingly used in conversation. So I'm pleased to see that.
yeah. And so, what's your philosophy, Gerry? What's your philosophy going forward in life?
Well, I think I said earlier that one of my favourite phrases is, we make a living by what we earn, we make a life by what we give. I spent many years of my life, I'm a Rotarian, so been involved in raising money for other people in society. I find that very rewarding. So helping others. Go back to the Scouts.
Yes. I mean, thank you so much for coming on and talking about all this. You've had an amazing career and an amazing life by the sounds of it.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Jackie. I was delighted to have the opportunity to get some things off my chest. I've never done this before. This is a new experience. I tend to be
Well,
behind the cameras, not in front of the cameras. But hopefully your audience will find it interesting.
I think they will. I mean, do you have any advice to young people, maybe in the Scouts, maybe going through uni at the moment, to
Well,
how can they?
Yes, the advice I would give, as I've given to my children and now grandchildren, is do something you enjoy doing. You find a career, a hobby, a lifestyle that you enjoy, and then work around that to create income. So that's the first thing I would say. And also go out and make it happen. Don't sit back and wait for it to happen. Be proactive. See opportunities. There's always opportunities, and so go for it, I think.
Yeah, very wise words. I think next, Gerry, you need to write a book. So put it
I
all
can't
down.
sit still long enough. That's the problem.
Well, we can start by what you've given me here. That's there's definitely a starting point
You've
with
got a
that.
few words, yeah. But bear in mind, my work is visual. For all the words I've sent you, I have tens of thousands of images of my life. I ran a film company, and within that film company, we had 2 staff photographers. So we took a hell of a lot of photographs over 50 years. which one day I'll get down and have a look at again. I've still got
Yeah.
many of them somewhere.
Yeah. Yes, you do sound like someone I know. Somebody I know very well who has over 50 years worth of photographs, films,
Yeah.
pieces of writing that really need to be
Well,
collated.
yeah, the problem I have is that the technology for seeing them, viewing them has changed. You know,
Yeah.
all the VHS cassettes. I made video cassettes of all the films that I made, 16mm documentary films, but I can't play those now. So unless I've downloaded them onto CDs, and even CDs you don't get very often now,
No.
CD players are pretty non-existent. You've got to have it as a digital file, but it means getting everything and then putting it into a new format just to view. And
Yeah.
that is a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it does sound very familiar.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's been lovely talking to you, Gerry. Thank you so much for being a guest today,
Well,
and I
thank
will
you
make
for
sure
inviting me, Jackie.
all of those links will be there for people to see.
Yeah,
So
good.
enjoy the rest of and Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to you. I see you've
Yeah,
got the
yeah.
jingle bells up and Father Christmas. I hope he brings you something new and exciting. Yeah.
Yes, I
Good.
hope so too. And
Looking
yes,
forward
so
to it.
it's a Merry Christmas to you and yours, and
Yeah.
enjoy, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jackie. God bless you. Bye.